expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hey, it's Celebrate Truth Radio, where we expose the world's lies and celebrate the truth every Saturday here on Revolution Radio. I'm your host, Robbie Davidson. Joined with me, as always, my awesome co-host, Pastor Nate Wolfe. How's it going, Pastor Nate?
Hey, Robbie, it's going very well. Are you sure you're up to this tonight?
Oh, it's going to be fun, man. We just got back from Take on the World 2019. Real quick, what was your overall impression?
Wow, I was blown away, and it was a real honor to be there as a speaker for the first time. You know, it's kind of like almost the old Nate and Jennifer last year and the new Nate and Jennifer this year. So it was kind of surreal.
It was incredible. It was amazing to meet your whole family. And speaking of which, we're going to have the entire family on tonight for a special edition of Celebrate Truth Radio. We're going to have Harrison, Holden, Hudson, and Hannah, as well as your wife, on to discuss pretty much your entire journey, as well as just leading up to current events that have all transpired here over the last year. We're pretty much coming up on the 1-year anniversary.
Yeah, it's September 14th will be 1 year since I was fired for simply attending the conference.
Must have been quite something. It's going to be interesting to hear their take on it all, and just how everything came to be, as far as what you were looking into, and even just new stuff that's transpired even after the fact, as far as coming to biblical cosmology and flat Earth, and it was really exciting too to have your new book being released at the conference. Maybe you talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that was really exciting. You know, originally I was starting to sweat it out just a bit because I had a few little adjustments I needed to make, and we ended up getting everything taken care of just in time. I decided to do a little bit faster shipping, and that way I ensured that the books were in time. And so I had ordered about 125 books, and it was really smart because I had several books that I gave out to certain folks. And I think I ended up selling about 50 or 60 copies at the conference, which was amazing. And that gave me just, a handful of books to have in stock when I came back into town, which was good because as soon as I got back into town, I've already had some orders to fill. And now my book is officially listed publicly on lulu.com. So folks can go to lulu.com and they can just type in Fired for Truth in the search there, and my book will pop up, and folks can just order right from there. They can choose their shipping, and I've already had 2 international orders come through, which was awesome. And one of the nice things about Lulu is they can handle international, piece of cake. But if I do it, then I've got to fill out custom forms and all that fun stuff. So international folks should go through lulu.com. And I'm also now have my book on Sacred Word Publishing. That's Zen Garcia and his family, Joy and Justin Garcia. So very excited about that. So there's 3 different ways that folks can pick up a copy of my book.
That's very exciting. And I wanted to go on the record and say how proud I am of you for staying up as late as you did at Take on the World.
Yeah, dude. I mean,
incredible.
One of the first nights, I think it was about 1:50 a.m. and I was actually pretty tired, and so I turned in just after 2. But that Sunday night, I know I was up till 3:30 in the morning, and I think I was just on adrenaline. It's like, man, this thing's just about winding down, and it was the last night, so I had to stay up late with all my buds, and so yeah, I'm glad that I made it past 3 a.m. And I don't know, you probably stayed up longer than that, but.
Yeah, I think a little bit longer, but I was pretty surprised when I saw how late you were up. That was pretty incredible. You're each conference, it seems like you're staying up later and later. That's what seems to be the trend.
Yeah, I'm working my way up to a Robbie Davidson level, but I don't know if I'll be there by FEIC 19. We'll have to see.
Well, I actually slept at Take on the World each night, so that was definitely an improvement.
Oh,
I
cool.
think Rick Hummer and others, they definitely stayed up a lot later than I did most of the nights. So I definitely was beat at Take on the World as far as longevity when it came to staying up. So
Yeah.
it was great though. I mean, seeing everyone again, new faces, all the speakers. That was just an incredible time. I'm sure you had an awesome time as well with getting to fellowship with all the various speakers at
Yeah.
Take on the World. I thought that
Yeah,
was
that was amazing. I mean, I knew it would be, it was a first for me as far as that, being with all of those speakers. And so I kind of had an idea of what to expect, but until we experienced that, you really just don't know. And it was so relaxed. The fellowship was great. There weren't any conflicts whatsoever. People were
Mhm.
getting along. We just enjoyed ourselves a lot.
It was so much fun, so much fun. And I know in this program, we've been able to share, your story a few times. Actually, Celebrate Truth was, I think, the second interview you did when all of this stuff took place of you being
Yeah.
fired. And we were able to do the interview. And surprising enough, it is actually the only interview. I was actually talking to my wife. And early in 2015, I did a show of about 5 episodes where I interviewed different people. But then since then, I have never interviewed someone on my channel, nor have I afterwards. If you actually look
Wow.
at it, I've never done it. So I find that really incredible that the fact that you were the only one that was like, yep, got to interview Pastor Nate. And all of a sudden we got you on. And all of a sudden now you're the my co-host on the show. And
Yeah.
we've been able to interact and meet more than a few times now. I think we're at about 3 or 4 times in person. And we're gearing up for Dallas, for the Flat Earth International Conference in
Yeah.
Dallas, Texas, which I just looked at the timer and I think we're almost at 70 days away. So it's coming up very, very quickly.
Wow. Yeah, yeah, Big D, man, Dallas. It's going to be amazing, and sounds like it's almost literally in Rob Skiba's backyard. So he sounded pretty excited about being so close.
Yeah, it's going to be great. Bob's actually in the chat room and YouTube, and a shout out to Bob Nodell from Globebusters. He'll
Yeah,
be doing a thing with Globebusters there. Obviously, Rob Skiba is going to be there. Mark Sargent, our special guest this year, will be Owen Benjamin. Everyone's really excited. Things are ramping up, and I've got a lot on my plate. When you look at 70 days, you think that's a long ways away, but it comes up really quick. It comes up
yeah.
really
I know.
fast.
Take on the World snuck up on us, and it was like, man, oh, we got lots of time to FEIC. It's like, nope, we do not. We got to get cracking here. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I hope to have at least 40 copies of my book with me at FEIC. And I know there's some folks there that obviously wouldn't be at Take on the World. They couldn't make it, or they're much closer to Dallas, so they're going to be there for that. So that's going to be amazing, and I can't wait. It's my first experience at FEIC last year was wonderful,
Hmm.
and Denver was a great venue.
Hmm.
And I'll say when the smoke cleared, everything was wonderful out there. So
Yeah, well, there's no surprises this year. Everyone obviously knows up front exactly what's happening. And if you actually go
yeah,
to fe2019.com, you can actually see the speakers, you can see the schedule. Everything's up. It's a work in progress, but it's pretty much already there as far as the entirety of the program. We're really excited about it. I'll be in contact with Isaac about shirts and hats, and there's just so much on the plate, but it's
oh yeah.
exciting. I'm excited.
And speaking of Isaac and Tony Chavez, and shirts, I'm working with them on having a Fired for Truth shirt.
Nice.
So we're looking at some options with that, and I didn't want to put pressure on them because it was close to Take on the World when I decided, hey, I need to get a shirt. And I was wearing a shirt last year, but I've got a shirt idea for folks to purchase and not just support me and my ministry, but just to support truth. And so, of course, my name is Fired for Truth, but this is going to be a Fired Up for Truth shirt, and we probably will have John 8:32 printed. The truth will set you free. So I'm excited for that. That's something that people can rock when they're at the grocery store or the post office, or hanging out with their family on the weekend,
Mhm.
and maybe turn a few heads and maybe get some engagement with people.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And I mean, with this entire journey, it's just so nice to have your entire family being part of it and actually being very receptive.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
still in shock that all of your family members, to different degrees, are pretty much on board. As far as where God has you on your journey and just everything that's
yeah,
transpired over the last year. It's going to be exciting to be able to talk to each one of them tonight. And I thought it would be important. Well, let's to make it easy, we can start with Harrison, the eldest
yeah.
of the children, and we can maybe talk to him and just kind of get his take on how everything went down, what he was feeling, because it must be an entire shock to the system when all this stuff is happening so quickly. So I mean, you can kind of dialogue as
Yeah.
well, recreating exactly what was going on. But it would be nice to hear from Harrison first, and then we will talk to Holden, then
Yeah.
Hudson, and then Hannah. So I mean,
Awesome.
having all four of your children on tonight to be able to talk about it, and then we'll in hour two we'll really get into Jen's perspective, because as your
Nice.
wife, it's very important that your wife is behind you when all of a sudden these things are happening. And
Oh yeah.
what an incredible year for you.
Well, and it's really just to give folks a little bit of a background, and maybe the kids will share some of this, but we moved here in 2011 to the Toledo area. And actually, I was fired from my previous ministry, not anything to do with flat earth or truth or stuff, but after being in Idaho for 8 years, I had respectfully challenged the eldership there because they were basically putting everything on me, all of the shepherding, the responsibilities, and they were kind of making me the point man to the point that I was reporting into them about everything that was happening in the church with the people. And I pointed out to them, I said, you guys are shepherds. You need to shepherd the flock. And you can't just, wait for Nate to go in, send Nate in, he'll scope it out, and then you decide what stuff you want to be involved in. I said, I'm happy to be one of the first people there, but if the shepherds are not there, if they're not on the front lines for the congregation, then that's biblically, that's a problem.
Mhm.
And of course, you could imagine that, when a minister is hired, right, even though they're ministering with the church, sometimes the leadership forgets that, they are a partner in ministry and not simply an employee. But, in this American church model, sometimes they forget that. And so they didn't like their employee chastising them, for their lack of responsibility. So I was given 90 days notice in that ministry, and that's what led us to Ohio. So, my kids and my wife and myself had been, challenged through that process. That was the first time that I had been fired. And the kids were younger and didn't understand, I think, as much of it, but they were still very much affected by it. And so that's the backdrop, moving here and the kids growing up, junior high and high school. And so when their father gets fired again,
Mhm.
that just really was kind of a double whammy. So I'm going to let Harrison jump in here,
Sure.
and he can share his perspectives on, maybe Harrison start with when you guys realized that Mom and I were seriously looking into this flat Earth thing before I even got fired. What were you thinking?
Well, definitely, you've always been somebody to speak up, when new topics occur, and you always, I think even one of the conferences, question everything, when you get new topics or you see new things, even if you're completely set on your biblical view or your, whatever viewpoint you have, you're always willing to, just to listen, to sit down, to speak with whoever, study the subject, open into the scriptures, and I mean, even at that meeting, that you had, while you were being fired, you were even trying after they had said, okay, well, you're done, you still wanted to talk to them about that. You still made an effort to, reach out to them, and, they wouldn't even listen to you,
Yeah.
And so I guess being the oldest of four, I was the most understanding of what happened in Washington, moving around my whole life, Alaska, Michigan, Washington, here I lived in Arkansas, by myself at school for a year. But I probably had it the best out of all four of us children upon your firing because, I wasn't away at college like Holden, and I was done with my schooling. I was working full time, staying busy. So that definitely helped me, with cope with everything. But I definitely tried to be there, for the family, and talk to people, and to just at least listen. I didn't dismiss everything. Yeah, some things, at first, I was kind of confused about, hey, where is this coming from? My dad believes what, or that's actually in the Bible. I can't tell you how many times I've read through the scriptures. The first book of the Bible, Genesis, through the Gospel, through what Jesus said, through Isaiah, and just overlooking all these things, all these words, and going back to the original, Hebrew, Greek, whatever it came from, and seeing how, the English language and all these translations, and how many people translated it, and all these different, versions of the Bible, NIV, ESV, and just looking upon some of those, it kind of just really started to open my eyes to actually, what was there. But I've always been, supportive of you, and I've always trusted you. I think it's awesome that, despite everything that happened to you, you're willing to, to stand up. And honestly, the Flat Earth, or this whole group of people have been a huge support group through you and for us,
Yeah.
Even if they don't understand. Knowing that you have people that you can call or text, talk to, or debate with, or study the scriptures with, because without them, honestly, I don't think any of us would be here.
Yeah. Yeah, the support was hugely important. And Robbie, one thing that was really a blessing was that we last couple years, especially with having young adult kids and high school kids, they're older and they can process more, they're more mature. And so Jennifer and I, we kind of erred on the side of being very transparent with the kids, and having discussions with them to try to get their input. And so the kids were able to process along with us. And also they started to see all of the support that came in. I mean, they saw me on the phone daily, with people like yourself and others who were encouraging me and, helping us, asking us how we were doing. They saw when the studio 5 boxes arrives on our front step, and somebody had donated an entire studio, which is really the studio that I'm in right now. Not a whole lot has changed. I mean, they saw the providence of God, working in that situation. But yeah, Harrison being the oldest, he kind of experienced the most in Idaho. We were on the Idaho-Washington border. So he remembers more probably about when we left there and came here.
So did you sit down the whole family like all at once and really just come out? Because, I mean, it was coming out here and there, but was it kind of like a, hey, family, we have to have a meeting, the earth is flat kind of thing?
Well, we, the first person that really kind of engaged was Holden, because he was doing a semester online at the time. And so he was home when the others were at work or school, and he and I kind of got engaged, and so he kind of got sucked in, and I encouraged him to look at some of these things for himself, and so he kind of went down the rabbit hole, and then we started pulling the others in. I think Harrison was next, and then Hannah, and then Hudson, and we did have some family discussions, but we never pressured the kids. We said, this is what we've discovered, this is what we're looking into. Here's some videos to consider. Here's some scriptures to consider. And one of the first things that we did as a family, I remember it well because it was in the early spring of 2017, just a few weeks after Jennifer and I were pretty much, locked in. And there was a NASA bloopers video that was circulating on YouTube. And it was just kind of a medley of all kinds of different CGI mistakes and, slips of the tongue and all of that. And I said, don't take my word for it, take NASA's word. So I showed them the video, and, just the buffoonery and the lies and all of this stuff. My kids' mouths were just dropped open,
Yeah.
And they were all like, seriously? Like, those were NASA astronauts? Those were, people in the ISS, they just couldn't believe it. And so then they were all off and running, kind of on their own time frame. And like I said, we did have many family discussions, but it wasn't like we sat, our kids down every night and said,
Sure.
okay, we're going to sit down and study this, and whether you like it or not,
Yeah.
they all kind of came to their own conclusion, and within a few months, they all pretty much were convinced of the true biblical cosmology.
So Harrison, for you, like in your circles, what's it been like? Do people in your circles know that your dad, kind of the reasons why he was fired, or has the flat Earth label been out there, and how have you dealt with that?
My whole life I've been very honest with, where I stand religiously, spiritually. All my friends, I've been called the Bible thumper. I've been called, a church boy, all of that. Obviously being a preacher's kid, I think I have an advantage, with my knowledge in the scriptures. My dad's always, challenged me to look at things. But, for the most part, I mean, I haven't been, the guy that's down people's throats about, oh, hey, this is actually fact. Hey, just, outside of even, discussing biblical cosmology, I mean, when somebody asks me a question and I give them an answer, and, I'll give them the scripture. If they ask for a prayer or anything, I would, I'll pray for them, pray with them, pray for their family. But, I've pretty much kept the people. I don't have a huge group of friends, but those that are close with me, they know about it. They know about it. But I haven't gone too deep into detail, except for one or two of them, which they're kind of the conspiracy theories, friends.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
very very interested in this sort of thing.
Nice. Cool. Well, that always helps when you're kind of getting into these discussions. So overall, it's been a positive experience for you, Harrison?
Yes, for sure. This time last year, probably 10 or 11 months ago, I was working. I do home renovation, full time. So I was working with a company locally, and I had time during my day where we were doing a house flip. So I would bring my speaker and my phone into the house, and I'd be painting the whole living room. Just starting to look at videos. I've watched some of yours, Rob Skiba's, who else? Chad Taylor, a couple other guys. Rick Hummer, and honestly just taking it upon myself to just analyze things, kind of going into it. But the more I listened, and I was painting or I was cutting wood or whatever, but it just dawned on me. I was like, yes, like this is actually something that I'm willing to try, willing to believe in, willing to look into. So
Well, that's very cool. Well, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your thoughts. I think it's really important that there's so much support in your family, and that really does help, on this journey going forward, definitely fighting for the truth.
Yeah, it means a lot, to me, and to have my entire family,
You're blessed.
there at
You're
Take
blessed.
on the
Plain
World.
and simple, man. You're blessed.
Yeah.
Seriously, that many, and just how
Oh,
it's
yeah.
all gone down. Absolutely. There's no
Yeah, I
doubt.
mean, we've really stayed close together as a family. Doesn't mean we're perfect. We have our, disputes, and we have days where we're all just going in the different direction.
Sure.
But we try to come together at least once or twice a week, for family dinners, and
That's awesome.
just to keep that connection. So
No, that's amazing. That's amazing. Well, I appreciate Harrison coming on. Maybe we'll go to Holden next. I had a lot of time to chat with Holden at Take on the World. So
yeah,
if Holden is around.
yeah, Holden.
Right here. How's it going?
Nice. How you doing, man?
Doing pretty well.
So when we were
Excited.
chatting there at Take on the World, you kind of mentioned that your dad approached you actually first of all people and said, "Hey, man, what was that like? Being the one in the family to get the information first, especially when it came to flat Earth."
Well, it kind of blew my mind, if I'm being honest. As my dad mentioned, I was doing, I did my junior year in online school. And so I got, a laptop and a printer and that kind of stuff from the school I was going through. So I was just doing my work, and I think my dad had gone to the store, or he was doing something. He came home, and I was just at the table working on my schoolwork. And he kind of just brought it up in a really interesting way. He said something about how he saw a picture of the sun with the clouds in front of it and the clouds behind it. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense. That goes completely against everything. And he was talking about, how the sun and the moon are up there, and there are different videos about how they look level and stuff like that. And I thought he was just messing with me, but we started to look into it, and it was interesting. I mean, I missed a day of school just looking at that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we kind of got down the rabbit hole, and I told him, I said, go look outside. You can see the sun and the moon in the sky at the same time in the daylight, and he was tripping out on that.
I
But
love the part of the story where he's like, "Yeah, I missed pretty much the entire day of school because I was looking at
yeah,
movies."
yeah,
That's so
yeah. See,
that's
I
so
was
flat Earth. I mean, you
I
just
was
get
supposed
sucked
to
in.
be his, like, to do the online school, you had kind of have like a parent mentor who signs up with you, and
Yeah.
they check and make sure you're turning in your work on time and you're not missing assignments, and they're supposed to keep you on task. But I just kind of felt like this is an education that money can't buy. So
Sure.
school's in session.
It's really hard to even concentrate when you come to this knowledge or this is presented to you. You're just like, "What? Are you kidding
Yeah.
me? Everything that I knew, is wrong." I mean, as far as the Earth and the sun, moon, and stars, it's just so overwhelming. So yeah, I can imagine it'd be hard to concentrate on studies when all of a sudden that was brought up. Definitely when you had brought it up with your son Holden, and from there, what was the journey like, Holden, for you? Like just seeing everything that happened with your dad. Maybe you can comment just on your perspective based on what you were feeling and what you were seeing.
Well, at that point, I had only myself, my dad, and my mom had known. They told me to like keep it quiet because they wanted to address the family like as a whole, as
Sure.
opposed to me just talking about it. Because I didn't have all the information. I just had a few things that stood out to me. And it was interesting. I remember seeing the video about the NASA astronauts, all the bloopers and stuff, which was funny because I was already on board more than anybody else. So I was just as excited to watch as I was to like see how my siblings reacted and all that. And actually, what happened when my dad was fired, I was at Harding University in Arkansas, so I was 700 miles away, and I don't remember what I was doing that day, but my dad texts me and says, "Do you have time to FaceTime, or can we call you?" And I was like, "Not right now, but I'll let you know when, because I had class or homework or whatever."
Mm-hmm.
And I knew something was wrong or something was up at least, because very rarely do we all like sit down to all talk, even at home and stuff, unless it's something serious or something everybody needs to hear. So I thought either something important or something bad is going on. And that's when I found out. I had to find out over FaceTime that my dad was fired, and that took a toll.
Mm.
That was difficult to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
But in the end, I think it worked out the best because the Lord knew what He was doing, and He put me in a place where I was surrounded by other believers, and I had the support and all that kind of stuff that I needed.
So how shortly after you got fired, Nate, how long was it until the whole family knew?
Well, I got fired in the morning, and Holden was away at school, Harrison was at work, and the two younger kids were also at school, and it was on a Friday, which meant that the two kids had marching band. And so they would do marching band, Friday nights for the football games for the high school. And so we were like, man, we're not going to have a chance to get most people together until like 10 or 10:30 at night. So it was really hard for Jennifer and I to just sit on that all day. But we wanted to try to get everyone together that we could, which was Harrison, Hudson, and Hannah. And so we knew we couldn't do that till about 10:30 p.m. So we messaged Holden while he was at school, and we said, hey, we're going to have a FaceTime. We got an important thing we need to talk about. And so it was like 10:30 or 11 o'clock at night. We had everybody here at the house, so 5 of us. Mm-hmm. And then we FaceTimed Holden, and we felt really bad that this is how Holden is going to find out. But, word travels fast, and we didn't want perhaps someone at the college to find out or something. We didn't want Holden to see on social media, mm-hmm. some of the teens from the youth group of the church that fired me. So we did it all. At the same time, and it was very tough. It was hard. We dreaded it because we knew the kids needed to know, but immediately you could just see the look on their face. This was the second time mm-hmm. that their dad had been treated unfairly. And so it was rough, but, Holden handled it so much better than we thought he would.
Which was worse, the first time or the second time?
You kids, Holden, what do you think? Second or first time was harder?
Hearing about you getting fired,
yeah,
probably the second time, because the first time I didn't fully understand. I'm not sure any of us really got it.
Yeah.
I mean, we understood the concept of someone losing their job, but what that meant, especially for someone in your career path,
Yeah.
The chances of you finding something
Yeah.
very close that suits all of our needs in terms of like location is
Yeah.
difficult. So
Yeah, most of the kids are saying that it's maybe the second one, but Harrison had a comment here.
Yeah, just like for the first one, we had the 3 month period to kind of acclimate and say, okay, well, we're not going to be here much longer. What are we going to do? When you came home, I mean, if we hadn't had our own house, if we had still lived, in front of the church in the parsonage, I mean, we'd be out of house and home.
Yeah.
I mean, what would have gone on from there? And it was immediate.
Yeah.
Immediately you're fired.
Yeah, it was a real blessing that we had purchased the home that we're in now. We had purchased it about a year before I got fired. And I'm so glad we did, because for 5.5, 6 years, 6 years, we lived in the church-owned parsonage. So, could you imagine, Robbie,
Yeah.
you're called in suddenly, you have no idea what's going on, you get fired in less than 5-10 minutes. And if we had lived in the church-owned home, they would have said, well, you've got to be out by such and such time. And we would have been displaced, and we would have been operating then on half of our income, household income, which would have made it very difficult for us to find a place like the one we have that's big enough for a family of 6. So, the father was watching out. He obviously knew the time frame. He knew what was coming. And that was our security, was, what? We still have our home, we still have our family, and we trust in God. He's, there's a reason for this, and he's going to move us forward, so.
Yeah, I always wonder as well too, just in the circles, just with your kids, as far as peers, just the rumors, the gossip, And I've asked you this before. Does really anyone know? Like you mentioned before, that people are watching you on YouTube and stuff, but maybe they can comment if they know anybody, from the church, or anybody that they were hanging out with, or kind of following the journey.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the kids would probably agree that most of the people that are looking into it were kind of in the closet, because they saw how we were treated, right?
Sure.
But I know that Holden was aware of a family. It's interesting. Before I got fired, he had this conversation with one of the kids from the youth group, who had casually said something. I don't know how the topic came up, but he had said that his family were flat earthers, right? This was before we went to the conference. And then all of a sudden I get fired. And then it's like all of a sudden, he was denying that his family were flat earthers. So
yeah, we were at church camp, and it just came up. We all thought he was trying to be goofy. I don't know how it came up. We were talking about creation or something like that. But he brought it up, and we all just kind of brushed it off. We thought he was joking around. And then after my dad was fired, I didn't stay in touch with too many of the people in the youth group. It was just difficult. I wasn't really keeping in touch with them anyway, because I was so busy at college. But he happened to message me and ask me what was up, and of course he had a side of the story that was different from our view. And there's always going to be two sides of the story, but his seemed pretty skewed. So I asked him, I was like, didn't you say this a while ago, what you believed? And I guess he changed his mind. He said he read into it more, and it wasn't what he thought it was, or something like that. So I was like, all right, man.
Interesting story. Hannah has an experience, if she can jump in real quick on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I became friends with one of the seniors at the high school that we went to, and excuse me, we were just like kind of talking back and forth, just getting to know each other. And she had talked to one of my brothers before, because she was friends with him before I knew her. And she knew that my dad got fired. And so she was like, hey, she just messaged me one day, and she was like, hey, didn't your dad get fired for flat earth or something? And that kind of like shocked me. It's like, because I didn't know like how she would have known that. And then I was like, yeah, how did you know that? And she explained that Harrison had told her. And I was like, oh, okay. And we talked for like hours, just messaging back and forth, like explaining how it happened, why it happened, my personal views, the views of my family and stuff. And we actually set up a little date to meet at both of our friend's house that was close to our house, and we just talked for like 3 or 4 hours about like flat Earth. It was really cool.
Yeah, we were getting concerned because we were like, she's been gone so long, and we knew that she was going to broach the subject. But when Hannah came back, she shared with us, about what they talked about, and she shared with us about all the proofs that she gave them in the Bible. I mean, we were blown away. We were like, man, Hannah just totally, killed it,
Mhm.
So that was cool. I mean, she was sharing her beliefs, and she
Very
didn't
cool.
even need us there. She didn't need her parents there. She was already, she had looked into it. She had looked at scripture. She knew what she believed. So that was really cool.
That is
Yeah,
very
it was
cool.
really funny too, because when I got to the house, because the friend's house is like right down the street from us, so I just walked there. I got in the front door, and she goes, "Okay, Mom, we're gonna go upstairs to talk about flat Earth." And she's like, "Okay, honey." So we just walked upstairs, sat down, and
That's hilarious.
just had a really long conversation. But it was really insightful, and I showed them a video by Shane Dawson,
Okay.
who's
Mhm.
a YouTuber, but
Yep.
he has a conspiracy theory series on his channel where he just explores different topics. And one of the videos he talked about flat Earth with his brother who believed it.
Yeah.
And he just had his brother like explain what the theory
That's a great
was to
video.
him.
I know exactly which video you're talking about. I've actually mirrored it on my channel. Great video.
It's a really good one just to like
Like a
if
101.
you're
Yeah.
if you're trying to talk to someone and you want them to know like a basis on your beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
So I showed them that video, and they were like asking questions, and I didn't think that they were like trying to make fun of me in any way. Like that was obviously, anytime you're telling someone about a topic that is kind of taboo or whatever,
Sure.
there's always the fear of persecution, or like, why do you believe that? That's so dumb, or just anything. But they were really open-minded. They were really nice about it. I don't know if any of them looked into it afterwards or if they have come to believe it, but I mean,
Yeah,
at
and
least I got to share it.
yeah, and actually, Holden, my second oldest, is dating now one of the gals that Hannah flat smacked. So she knew what she was getting herself into, at least in
Nice.
part. So,
Very
but
cool.
I
That's
crossed
awesome.
that bridge so Holden didn't have to.
Yeah.
That's
Paved the
very
way.
cool. That's very cool. Well, we haven't talked to Hudson yet as far as his take on everything. Maybe he could comment and chime in a little bit here.
Yeah, go ahead, bud.
Where to start?
I'm actually fascinated, Hudson, because when I was talking to Holden, he was mentioning that you were the most analytical, the most kind of scientific, that it took you kind of the longest. Maybe you can explain your initial reaction, and then also just how you wrestled with this, with science and all that in your head.
Well, I guess to start, as some background, my freshman year, I was taking the biology class, your basic freshman biology class. So I was prepping for the evolution section of all that fun stuff. And I like to go to what was it? It was like Answers in Genesis, like apologetics and stuff like that, and their take on like creation and such. So I was pretty deep into that, especially my freshman year. And I would like to fashion myself as someone who is more on the analytical and more philosophical side of things.
Sure.
Think about all that sort of stuff. So when this whole ordeal happened, it was very interesting for me to think about it, because it's not like I trusted science anyway for the most part.
Sure.
But it seemed almost like a stretch, too much of a stretch.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So the first time that I heard about this, we were talking about when Holden was staying home and Dad were there chatting. I came home from school and Holden just hits me out the door and he was like, "Oh, by the way, we figured it out today." And I was like, "Oh yeah, very impressed. You should go turn on the Xbox." And I never really thought anything of it. So this round of the Take on the World, when we went, I had a moment. I was just thinking. I was like, "Dang, that moment I never thought would have turned into anything, and here we are at this big event. My dad's speaking.
Mm-hmm.
It was quite the turn, and I've had a lot of turns in thinking in my perspective on the world and such. It's hard to wrestle with, because it's like, to what degree do you trust science,
Sure.
and what degree do you not? Now, for several months, I didn't really look into it too much.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't watch too many videos like the others, but of course my parents were always there, and not forcing it, but they commented where they could, and they were trying to teach me what they know. And so over time, I'm kind of like looking at stuff, and I'm of course going to Tech on the World. I've seen all these wonderful presentations, and it's like it's starting to click a lot more in certain degrees. And then for me, basically right now, I'm at the point where it's like I can't prove definitively either one because I can't like launch myself into space or into the firmament. So, but I'm inclined to believe that perhaps that the Earth is flat. At least I would like to hope that it is, because that means the Lord is right there, and He has so much influence and power that this is the way that it is, and like it's almost like the opposition is proof of His strength. Like if the deception is this great, like we're onto something good, like we're on the right path.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, sometimes, taking that gradual journey is beneficial. You don't have to rush into these things. Like one of the mottos that a lot of flat earthers will say is like, go do your own research, right? And I mean, when it comes to the Bible, read the Bible for yourself. It's right there. That's what really hit me hard, at the very beginning. I mean, it's one thing. And I think Rob Skiba struggled with that as well. He's like, well, the Bible, 100%, I believe it's, not a spinning ball flying through space. But I got to do these experiments. I got to, do this empirical science, which is cool too, because we're really getting back to true science.
Right. And then in relation to the Bible, this is just something that kind of struck me as I was explaining this situation to my girlfriend. Obviously, we were distraught about what happened, so we were just, kind of mulling it over and letting people know and trying to figure out what to do next. So I was talking to my girlfriend, and in regards to the Bible and the way that at least us flat earthers think, it was very interesting. It seemed almost like reasonable, because everybody will joke about like, oh, flat earthers, right? Spinning whatever. And they make fun of us and they immediately dismiss it. And I've had this experience a lot. Not that I'm extremely vocal in high school, but in my humanities class, which, is supposed to be the more open-minded topics, we would get into discussion of conspiracy, and then they would just, make fun of, you got the moon landing. Everybody's kind of like, but they like make fun of it or whatever. And they don't really want to touch 9/11. And then they just make fun of the flat earthers. But having experienced this, it seems actually somewhat reasonable to me. It seems like two core things, which is a distrust of the government. It's like, who doesn't have that, right? It's simply to the degree. And then a literal versus like symbolic interpretation of the Bible. It seems very, very simple to me. The difference is not some astronomical thing. So I don't know, that perspective is allowed me to sort of think of other conspiracies.
Yeah.
Or say like the moon landing, looking into 9/11 and such, and just being like, how unreasonable are they?
So before Flat Earth, Hudson, where were you on the conspiracy scale? And I always say, JFK or, the moon landing. Before Flat Earth, it was kind of like, where are you on that conspiracy scale before Flat Earth? Were you kind of that type that really weren't into conspiracy theories?
Well, I must say, just as a note, it's interesting how much like 9/11 and the moon landing is brought up just like as a conspiracy in its own like isolated form. Like I'm inclined to believe that more people like believe it in their own like hearts as much as they'll like admit it to them, because like everybody talks about it, even at school where they make fun of flat earthers. They're like, yeah, but what about like the structural integrity of the buildings? Like how did it all drop at once? And so in sort of a way, it's like it's fun. It's kind of like
let's go.
Yeah, right. So going to a public high school and being a teenager in America, it can be wonderful, but sometimes it's just like the most boring thing. And you're like, man, I wish that there was a little something more to life. And then here comes these wonderful conspiracies of like, well, what if the moon doesn't exist? It kind of is a paradigm shift. Nice. So I entertained them as entertainment. It was like, this has, a nugget of truth to it. It seems it's reasonable. So let's think about it, maybe just to make life a little more interesting.
So Robbie, I wanted to have Hudson say something real quick about when I got fired, what was going through
absolutely.
Yeah.
So I remember a moment vividly. I was sitting in the living room and I was across from my mom and my sister, and they kind of like huddled together and they were hugging and such, and I just had this image in my mind, and it really, I mean, honestly, it just sucked. Like I was like what, 8? the first time.
Yeah, it was.
So I was young. I think the only memory of that whole incident I have is like sitting outside like a McDonald's or something, or maybe it was the church, and just hearing about this and not understanding. And then we move on to the second iteration, getting fired twice. But like, I just remember thinking like you gotta be joking, right? But I was like, it's not something you joke about, because I was like, this is too uncanny. Like, this happened again. My dad got fired from the church again, but it was serious, and like I remember it like hit me like a wave. I was like what are we supposed to do? Like, this happened, and of course you start to make the connections of like what that means for us, and I'll admit that's been rough for me to kind of tackle, because I'm inclined to believe like it's not unreasonable to believe in these things, and I personally I try to keep as much of an open mind as I can, and so it's like hard to reconcile that with like the love we're supposed to have as Christians, the love of this church family I thought I had for 7 years, to be gone in the blink of an eye. And not only that, like they haven't come to support us afterwards really much at all.
Yeah.
And that was just kind of almost like appalling. It just like we invested so much of ourselves into this church, and especially us kids.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, of course, this is Dad's channel, and he's rocking it, and I love it. But like we're behind him the whole way. Everything that happens to Dad happened to us.
Yes.
He gets fired, we get fired.
Yeah.
And that experience was pretty terrible. I remember waiting on that Sunday, first home church, and we were like getting the house clean, getting ourselves prepped and ready to answer questions, say prayers, give hugs, whatever, for those who came to visit us. And did we even get anyone?
We had a couple people that did visit after the church service ended. They had announced it. And so we did have initially, there was like 4 or 5 people that engaged with us right away, but it didn't take very long. It kind of trickled down. And then the first few months that after I was fired, there was only about 2 or 3 people that were checking in on us regularly. And, the last few months, there hasn't been a single person. So,
You've done
that's
a lot of damage control at the church and scaring people off, I think.
Yeah, and of course, they painted me as a false teacher or as a crazy guy or whatever. But so, yeah.
It's really this topic, though. I mean, I say this all the time. It's
Yeah.
really not personal. This topic freaks people out, especially churches. They like to just let's just deal with this really quick. Let's just get it out, and we don't have to deal with it anymore. They're just so terrified. Being kicked out of 2 churches, my family, we've been through that experience where it's so abrupt, it comes out of nowhere, and there's something deeper going on, because that's just not normal behavior for anyone, let alone a church.
Yeah, Hudson has one, and you're right.
Yeah.
Hudson has one more quick thing, and
in
then
relation to this, it almost seems like an aggression. It's ridiculous. Like, not only are they afraid to tackle it, they went ahead and called all the local congregations and let them know that Dad was a quote false teacher.
Yeah.
Like they went out of their way to close all doors to Dad for no reason. And we had a good friend Kevin Seif at his church. Oop, dropped the name. But
Kevin's a good dude.
Yeah, like one good man in his congregation. We're willing to be like, no, we know Nate. Like, he's a good dude.
Yeah.
But like, just the fact that they would go to such lengths, almost to shoot us in the foot.
Yeah.
After all we've been through with them, 7 years.
I mean,
Yeah.
I've been saying this a lot, to your father, but I really do believe this is newsworthy, and it might be really profound if the entire family, contacting local media, but just telling your story. I think that people need to hear this is what's happening to people, right? It's almost like you were selected for a reason. And quite interesting, like I said to you before, Nate, that you're the very first pastor to come out publicly, not afraid, not being an anonymous. I had mentioned that throughout the years, I had pastors reaching out to me about similar stories, but you're the very first one. And I do believe it's newsworthy, and it's something that maybe, the entire family kind of getting behind and thinking, hey, let's do this. I really think that the news media would pick it up. And I mean, just think about
something to
pastor being
consider.
fired for taking the Bible literal. You know? Yeah.
And looks like, I don't know, we got about 4 or 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I wanted to let Hannah real quick, before we go to the break, share her thoughts about what was going on when I got fired.
Absolutely. Hannah's joining us into hour 2 a little bit, correct? As well?
Yep.
Okay,
she
good.
wants to stick around, so yeah.
Good. Sounds good. Okay.
I'll definitely pop in.
All right.
But the day I was the day I was fired.
Yeah, everybody got fired that day.
The day my dad was fired, it was a Friday, and I'm in the marching band at my school. And usually a bunch of the kids stay after school just because we're going to be there to go practice and march out. And we usually go to a little restaurant that's across the street from the school we go to. And so I was just hanging out with my friends. And that morning, I had asked the parents if I could stay after school.
You texted us from school.
Yeah. Because that morning, I'd been like, can I stay after? And they're like, no, come home. Like, you got to do dishes and laundry or whatever it was. I don't remember.
Yeah.
But then I texted them at school again because you gotta double try. Maybe in the morning they didn't have enough coffee or something. They were a little grouchy. So I texted them during lunch, and they were like, "Yep, we'll bring you your uniform." And that was a little weird.
Yeah, we didn't want her to be the only kid home, and she would be able to sense like what is going on with mom and dad. So
yeah, so they were like, yeah, we'll bring you your uniform. And that was like a little red flaggish, but I was like, hey, I'm getting what I want, so whatever. And so we marched that game. We probably lost because our team sucks. But we got home that night, and everyone was sitting on the couch. And I was like, what's going on? And the parents were like, we got to talk to you guys about something. We're going to FaceTime Holden. And everyone said it. They were like, we're fired. This happened. They told us like the whole story that everyone knows about the elders texting them. And it was just really like kind of heartbreaking, honestly. Like we've known these people for 6, 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
It was just really difficult. I remember I was just like crying a lot because that's, it's emotional. It's hard to deal with.
Yeah, and it was a complete shock to everybody, even including myself. But imagine the kids' shock, and then this happened before, so you start to have kind of those, like a flashback, and it really is a trauma. I mean, it's an emotional, mental trauma, and I would even say a spiritual trauma. And I'm really proud of the kids, and I'm, how they've bounced back. I'm really thankful to the Father for, just helping us, because as you can hear, I mean, the kids they're all solid in their faith.
Absolutely,
and,
yeah. I mean, it's incredible.
Survived.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
I think they all should start YouTube channels. And
there you go.
Come out there with their
There you
story, and you never know where it goes. But obviously pray about it. But I definitely think that there's definitely something bigger for your children in this story as well, too. It seems very interconnected, and it's such an incredible story, and I'm glad that it's able to be shared. And like I said, I'm serious that definitely keep it in prayer about the media, because I think a lot of people need to know that pastors are being fired for taking the literal interpretation of the Bible. It's not right, and it's definitely a form of abuse in my opinion. But it's something that we've talked about before. Anyways, we're going to go to hour 2. Everyone that's watching on YouTube, this is it for the broadcast. Go to revolution.radio for hour 2 right after this break. Really appreciate you all being here. We got a lot more coming up right after this break.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message.
Hello, all you good